I'm Stephen Henderson.
And I'm Malachi Barrett.
And this week we are going to talk with one of the now 9 mayoral candidates here in 2025. We're now past the filing deadline. There were 10 people who said they expected to file their petitions. We ended up with 9. Rogelio Landon is no longer going to be on the ballot. But this week we're going to talk with Mary Sheffield, who is maybe the most familiar name in the field. She is the current president of the city council. She comes from a family with a long legacy in Detroit politics and activism, union activism, and a number of other things. The only poll that I've seen so far suggests she is not just the front runner, but is like way out ahead of everyone else. We want to talk to her today, like we have been with all of the candidates, about why you're running and what would you do if you win.
This one's been a long time coming. Sheffield even is described by other campaigns as the top dog in this race. We got a lot of rubber left on this highway, but she certainly entered the race, I think, with a lot of excitement and attention. She was the first to launch her campaign. She was the first to turn in her petition signatures. I think she's trying to lead from a position of authority. I'm the city council president. I should be the mayor. And, it's going to be interesting, I think, if she does emerge from the primary, who's going to be that number 2 person.
Yeah.
I think she's interesting because she's been on the council since 2014. So that's, pretty close to Duggan's, tenure she's been there for. Right. She's been leading the city council, leading, budget conversations and policy and crafting legislation. Mm-hmm. Being the mayor obviously is a big step up and a different kind of job too. So I'm eager to hear from her about, how that experience got her ready and what she wants to do in the big seat.
I think a lot of the emphasis for her has been on the idea that she's been a partner in the things that Mayor Duggan would say were victories over the last, 10 or 12 years since he's been mayor and she's been president of the city council. She will have to distinguish herself as well, because of course, city council president doesn't make those decisions and can't make any decisions really on their own. They've got to get the council to come along. A key question there is, what's the executive Mary Sheffield look like? How would she lead in a position where, the buck stops on her desk and where the ideas really have to come from her? For the administration. We're so early in all of this that, I'm reluctant to jump on anybody yet about what they have or haven't done. But I do think there's significant pressure on her to start doing that, to start really articulating, a leadership profile and an agenda that she wants to work around.
If you look at the history, it might suggest that she has her work cut out for her because, typically, historically, traditionally, city council members have not really found a path to the mayor's seat. It's happened very few times in the city's history. And I kind of wonder why that is. Do you have a sense of what is it that makes it hard to make that transition?
I think they're very different roles and that they cement people in those roles. I can remember in somewhat recent history, 2 people who stood out as potential mayoral candidates who were on council. Irma Henderson, who was a very effective and very powerful president of the city council, stood up to Coleman Young pretty frequently and led the council in different directions when she thought it was necessary. People thought for years that she would be a good a candidate. When I was a kid here in the 70s in Detroit, people used to ask me all the time, is Irma Henderson your mother? We're not related.
I think I've asked you that once, probably.
Right. We were not related. She was a wonderful politician. But, she could never make that turn to real mayoral politics. The other person who stands out is Kenneth Cockrell Sr., who was a very powerful council member, a very had a very big voice in the city and a history in the activist community in Detroit, and was very, very popular. I mean, really beloved. He said he was going to run for mayor in 1989, I believe was the year, and he died before before he had a chance to do that. He died quite suddenly. Other than that, it's hard to come up with many people who have even had the opportunity. Kenneth Cockrell Jr., of course, became mayor after Kwame Kilpatrick had to resign, and he held that seat until the next election when Dave Bing came out ahead. So they're just different in people's minds more than anything, I think. And that's the challenge for Sheffield is people know her. I think they for the most part like her and think she's done a good job. She's going to have to make the case about what she will do differently or how she will be different in this new role.
She's not the only city council member who's running for mayor either. We've got Councilmember Fred Durhal, who we've talked to on the show, who represents District 7, and Santiel Jenkins, who used to be on the city council and actually used to be a council president herself, but she has that executive experience now leading Thaw.
Yeah.
And that might be kind of a hole in Sheffield's resume, not having that kind of executive experience. But I think her district is really interesting too, because it seems to be kind of at the center of a lot of the tensions that are, going on across the city when we're talking about, housing access and displacement and growth and who benefits from growth and how to boost up neighborhoods. Her district spans a pretty wide geographic area. It covers basically from Belle Isle west all the way through, the eastern edge of downtown and then kind of up northwest to New Center in the area around Henry Ford. And there's a lot of different kinds of neighborhoods within that stretch. There's a lot of different scales of development. She has to weigh in on things like, District Detroit and the Rent-Cent, and also efforts to build, single family homes in Island View.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, I think, she's pretty well regarded among the block club leaders that I've talked to within the district. I've also heard, varying things about, people having a hard time getting a hold of her. So I'm interested how that, that you have a record as a city council member. People see how you address problems and solve them. They also see maybe when you didn't show up for them. So how will that kind of surface throughout the campaign? I'm pretty interested to see that.
Yeah.
Her departure from District 5 leaves a pretty big hole because there are, I've got my list down here. There's 6 or 7 people.
There's a lot of people who are trying to run that one. Yeah. And not a lot of names that jump out either. Not a lot of people who I think have much of a profile. So it could be a real contest that could be close.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of these council districts are going to have some fun races. We'll get into that, I'm sure, on a subsequent episode. But there's a number of open seats at the city council.
Yes.
And so that's something that the next mayor also has to think about. How are they going to work with the council and new council members? Sheffield was elected kind of at a time where a lot of the council turned over.
Yes.
Particularly amid some scandal too. Not that she was involved, but other members were involved. And so, I think in her time on the council, we saw a better relationship with the mayor. Mayor Duggan has talked about this a lot, that he has, seen that relationship improve during his tenure. So how does that continue into the future? Somebody that does have experience on the council and maybe has a bit better understanding of their limitations and how they work and how they can work with the mayor, could be an asset there as well.
Yeah. We should, before we get to Mary, we should talk about her family legacy, which is, substantial. Her grandfather, Horace Sheffield Jr., was a very prominent official with the UAW, and I should note, a very close friend of my grandfather, William Beckham Sr., who was also a pretty prominent UAW official. They were very close in advising Walter Reuther about integration in the union and about the growing political class and political chops in the Black community and how the UAW was going to interact with that. And then, of course, her dad is Horace Sheffield III, who is a longtime Detroit activist and now leads DABO, Detroit Association of Black Organizations, somebody who, if you're involved in politics at all in Detroit, you know that name.
And she's talked about being part of like an 80-year legacy of Black activism in the city and being part of kind of a lineage of, civil rights activism in the city. Her mom was a nurse and an educator as well. Mm-hmm. Her grandmother was a pretty prominent activist, if I recall. So I think that's a pretty understated but influential piece of this as well, is that people not only know her, they know her family really well.
Yeah.
And they have, a network of associates and supporters and DABO and churches that she's a preacher as well.
Yeah.
Are going to be lending support. She's done a couple events at the Sheffield Library that's named after, I think, her aunt. But that's a big factor in this as well. She's got some influential support
that
there.
matters still in Detroit. There are a lot of people who recognize certain names, know about legacies, and it has an influence over how they vote. She will undoubtedly want to use that to her advantage in this race.
Another distinguishing point is Mary's young. She's a millennial. Yeah. She was the youngest elected to city council at the age of 26.
4 or 6, something like that.
And she, I think, is 37 now.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, what does that look like in kind of a changing of the guard? We're also seeing some new generation kind of rise into political power as well. And I think people are kind of hungry for that.
Yeah. I mean, people are hungry for it. People are interested in it. I hear from some folks, though, trepidation because the last time we went down that road with Kwame Kilpatrick, who was the youngest mayor in the city's history, I think, Mason Stevens might have been, but 31 when he was elected. I think there are a lot of people who feel like the mistakes that got made during that administration really damaged the openness to young people in office. Of course, there was a racial price to pay for that as well. I mean, it really changed the way a lot of people think about politics in the city. She's a young candidate. She wouldn't be the youngest in the city's history to be mayor. But does she get questions? Does she get blowback about, well, are you ready? Do you need more time? Do you need more experiences before you do this job?
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note that she's been knocking on the door for a while. I mean, she first ran. Her first political campaign was at the age of 21 when she ran for a state house seat.
Right?
She ran again for another state house seat a couple years later, and then eventually got on the council. So she has a lot of experience in running campaigns and putting yourself out there publicly, running for office as well. And this would be kind of the culmination of a long journey, I think, in preparation to run for mayor. So we're going to talk with her. We're going to hear more about her vision for the city, and I'm excited for you guys to hear the conversation. All right, we are here with Council President Mary Sheffield. Thank you so much for being on the program. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me, always.
So I want to talk about your role as City Council President. Before, Stephen and I were talking about how it's kind of not typically been a path to the mayor's office, city council members. Here in Detroit, the president is selected by colleagues. They have to basically vouch that they want you to lead them. What comes with that responsibility? Like, tell us, what is the role of the council president?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think a lot of people don't know is we serve as the administrative kind of branch of overseeing the operations of all the employees on the 13th floor. And so all of the administrative staff we oversee. And so that function comes under the council president's office. But traditionally, outside of that, I mean, we run the formal sessions, ensure that the agenda is set, that appropriate items are referred to committees, and I preside over the formal session on Tuesdays, and then the administrative function as well. I think it's a great opportunity, though, because the last 12 years serving on council, the perception of the city council has changed drastically. And people oftentimes say, this has not been a path to the mayor's office. And I understand why, because in the past, council always had, and we still are blamed for everything. But
I see it every week.
We are. But now I think it's more, this council is at least working with the mayor. There's more collaboration. There's not this adversarial bickering, pointing fingers, not getting things done. But we're talking, we're working together, and there's progress. And I think the overall perception of the city council has changed compared to years ago, where people looked at council as it was dysfunctional, it was not professional, there was a lot of bickering, name calling, and that whole atmosphere, I believe, has changed, which has allowed a different perception, which I think will help in this upcoming race.
Yeah, I think that's really worth emphasizing. The mayor's talked about this a lot at his State of the City events, that the relationship has much improved.
Yes.
I think it was in 2021, we had a pretty new slate of council members elected. A lot of the people who were there are on their first term. A lot of longer time members like you and Pro Tem Tate. What do you think really changed to restore that kind of perception of the council being more functional and doing what its job is?
Yeah, I would just say new leadership, understanding where we've come from. A lot of the dysfunction led us to, decline. We came out of bankruptcy. We were not getting things done, and I think it was a disservice to our residents. And I think people wanted to see leadership that was able to get things done. And so, with the new council, with council by districts, I think also played a role, which allowed, for example, someone like myself to be elected for the first time in the history of Detroit. It allowed for a new slate of leaders and bringing a different perception, a different method of leadership that allows now for that collaborative effort and professionalism that I think we all deserve.
So you've called yourself the most qualified candidate in this race. Tell me about some of the things that you've been able to accomplish in the last decade being at the top of the council.
Yeah, so aside from the People's Bills, which I do encourage the listening audience to go view.
BridgeDetroit.com, we've got some reporting on that as well.
Yeah, please do, and thank you for covering that, because it's really over 20 pieces of legislation that really came from grassroots up. It came from the people, it came from listening to the concerns of everyday voices and responding not with just rhetoric, but literally with sound policy to address those issues. So over 20 pieces of legislation. Aside from that, just the investment in parks, the amount of economic development, the $1 billion that we've created in affordable housing over the last 8 to 10 years, I definitely played a huge role in getting that happen, making that happen. The amount of jobs that we've created for Detroiters, the investment in our parks, the crime reduction that we see in Detroit, all of these things are in partnership with the city council and my office to ensure that the progression of our city is moving forward.
I want to dive into a couple of those, but first I want to talk a little bit about the budget process, because I feel like that's a really good example of some of the things that we're talking about. The council spends quite a bit of time, in these budget meetings talking about making changes to fund their priorities. But, the council has a limited amount of control over that. Those conversations kind of talk about 3% of the overall budget, I think. And there were a lot more requests this year for different council priorities. Some which you got funded, some not. If you were mayor right now, what would be different about this current budget?
The current budget or just the process?
I would say the budget. Like what didn't get in the budget that you would have
I would definitely say more investment in, I know, again, we have heavily invested in demolition, and there's always room. And I think every single budget season, we look at how we can possibly pull from demo and put more towards housing services or preventative measures to prevent foreclosure prevention. And so I would love to see more investments in creating paths to home ownership, the down payment assistance program, beautification grants, right to counsel, all of these measures that I believe are help prevent homelessness in our city and help with the issue of housing in Detroit. I would love to see more investment in how we are going to ensure that our vacant schools, for example, have a plan to be rebuilt or to be demolished and to turn into innovative ways to address our housing needs in Detroit. And so maybe just shifting some of the priorities towards things that I've always advocated for, right? And so those are some of the things that I will probably change. And also, I think there should be a participatory budgeting process, which I've been very vocal about, which other cities do have, that allows a certain amount of the budget to go into community so that community can decide where they would like those funds to go.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting conversation as part of this budget process. A lot of other cities do this. They basically sets aside a portion of the budget that the city, or that residents can get, actually even potentially vote on how it works a little bit differently depending on the city. So if you were mayor, would you like to implement that as part of the budget?
Yeah, I'm definitely open to it. I think there's models that have already been implemented in other cities that work. Understanding we have to have fiscal discipline, and I'm very aware of that, as I've approved over 12 budgets now to date that have been balanced. But I do think it's something special that allows residents to feel empowered throughout the budgetary process. And if there is a certain amount that we can allocate, that community can have a say-so over where those funds go, I've always supported that, because again, it's about empowering residents to feel a part of the democratic process.
You talked about moving demolition funds to affordable housing. We're kind of coming to the end of this era of demolition. And I wonder if you feel that we've been too heavy-handed on the demo side instead of the rehabilitation and preventing properties from getting so bad that they have to be torn down.
Yeah, that's been a challenge. I think, no doubt we have had to clear Detroit. There's been a lot of blight in the city, a lot of vacant structures, homes, and commercial as well. But I think there are a vast amount of Detroiters, and even from my own eye, that could say that there are so many structures that could have been saved and preserved, and more of an effort really to how we create paths to home ownership and rehabilitating homes to put people in them. And so that would be more of a focus for me. And now that a lot of the vacant land is clear now. Now we have the ability to rebuild Detroit. And that is my focus, is how we create infill housing, how are we creating paths to homeownership, and allowing community to have a say-so in the development of their communities.
There's some interesting conversations going on about the future of the land bank as well.
Oh my gosh,
right?
yes.
They will no longer receive a subsidy from the city this year because they've got a big fund reserve.
Yep.
And you have recommended that some of the programs and responsibilities the land bank has should come under the housing department, come under the city's control. What do you see for the future of the land bank if you're mayor? How would you change anything about the organization?
I think a part of the first 100 days in office is really re-examining all of the current state of programs and departments and trying to figure out how we can overall improve customer service and ensuring that government is effective and efficient. And I think any new administration should do that. And the land bank will be a part of that process. I have always been vocal that, the land bank has its purposes, but I think that the transparency and the accountability is missing because it is an authority. And so I would love to see some functions come back in and be more innovative and creative in how we can use that vacant land to empower residents, again, to be homeowners, and for other issues and quality of life things that we see fit. And so the land bank will be something that we'll discuss. I'm not going to say, here today that they will be dismantled or will, what operations will move in. But I do think that there will be a serious look at how we can better improve the processes and ensure that people, Detroiters, can have access to property. It bothers me so much when I hear people who have been maintaining lots and can't get access to land that they've been maintaining for years, and they're trying to develop projects in their community, but there's so many issues and barriers with the land bank. And again, I would love more transparency and more city involvement in those discussions so that we're empowering Detroiters to develop the cities in which they live. So that will be something on the table to examine and to have a thorough assessment on how we can better improve.
Yeah, I mean, you hear and I hear the number one thing is people can't get access to this land that's in their neighborhood. And then in a lot of cases, like you're saying, they're already doing the work to maintain them, and then it gets sold to maybe an out-of-state developer or something, and it's very frustrating for people. District 5, I think, is kind of it is a place where a lot of these conflicts we see in the city take place because of the geographic diversity, the difference in some of the neighborhoods. You've got kind of the edge of downtown all the way out to Island View. So tell me about how you've tried to balance decisions around development and displacement and these concerns that residents have about what's happening in the neighborhoods versus what's happening downtown, in D5 while you've been on the council.
Yeah, so I've always just tried to center equity at the forefront of everything I do as development comes, because I never want to be a barrier to growth in Detroit and progress. But as it comes, making sure that I'm advocating for the issues that my district has, whether it's access to housing, home ownership, access to home repair grants, and ensuring that as development comes and there's community benefits that are associated with that development, that they're actually addressing the needs of community. I also think that the inclusionary housing ordinance is a prime example of how you balance both, right? So as new market rate rentals come to Detroit, now a certain percentage has to be set aside for housing for low-income residents in Detroit. So we're welcoming growth, but we're also saying we want to include those who are here or those who may not can afford market rate rentals to have access to the new development in our city. So I think for me, it's always been about intentionality and understanding that, we're going to have a combination of incomes in Detroit. We're going to have more affluent neighborhoods and some that need more resources and help. But how do we balance our approach and our advocacy and ensure that resources are getting to both equally?
We talked with a few developers on our last episode about building affordable housing. And in my mind, in that conversation was more focused around how we bring down costs, because that's what I hear at the council table a lot. How do we, create tax incentives and things like that to make it more financially make more sense for people to do that? The developers convinced me actually that the problem that we should focus on is raising wages of people that can't afford this stuff.
Yes.
And that is the root of so many problems, right? Poverty and people not making enough money to live in the city. What do we do about that? That problem, poverty in the city, and helping people raise their income.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And one of my pillars of the campaign is actually the seventh pillar that I believe is important to create a world-class city is we have to address social services and basic needs, ensuring that the most vulnerable in our city is benefiting from the growth of Detroit. And so, again, it's about investing in people. It's ensuring that we're providing the education, the workforce development, the skilled trades, and all of the training that is needed to raise the incomes of Detroiters. There's one thing to tout jobs, but it's one thing to have quality jobs. And there was a U of M study that I always go back to that says that I think 49% of Detroiters right now that are working full-time are getting paid below a living wage. So that means people are just really making ends meet. And so again, it's about the quality of the jobs that we're attracting, but more importantly, how are we ensuring that Detroiters have the skills to be able to benefit from those jobs? I think it's a great point to mention that a lot of talk is about affordable housing. And I think one of my goals and my missions as mayor is how do we kind of transition people out of affordable housing and from renters to homeowners. There's not a lot of conversations about upward mobility and how we transition people from where they currently are to a higher economic standpoint as well. And so that is going to be a part of what this new department that we're in the process of formalizing and hopefully can do within the first 100 days of the administration is a Department of Human, Family, and homeless services, which will centralize all of the wraparound services that the most vulnerable in our community needs, whether it's education, housing, workforce development, and really bringing city government to them and centralizing the support and the case management services that they need to really walk them through, hopefully increasing and improving their overall quality of life.
What other things are on that 100-day agenda?
Oh my gosh.
Share with us.
Yeah, 100 days. First and foremost, as I mentioned, analyze the current state where we are from departments to the administrative staff throughout the city of Detroit. We hope to launch the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. We have a huge Destination Detroit economic plan, which speaks to some of the needs that are needed from a cultural standpoint of changing how business is done in Detroit. Want to make Detroit the best city in America to grow and start a small business. And so we have tons of reforms that we can implement there, starting with the Office of Small Business Affairs that helps navigate entrepreneurs and small business owners through bureaucracy and provides the ecosystem and the support that they need to succeed. And so, yeah, we're excited. 100-day plans, we're still rolling it out, but a lot of it is going to be centered on improving the efficiency of city government, how we can take city government back to the neighborhoods so that there's no barriers or gaps there as well.
So one of those programs that's funded with ARPA that a lot of folks have benefited from and want to see continue is the Right to Counsel program. What is the future for that? With the loss of funding, are we going to be able to find money in the budget to keep that running?
Yeah, that's my goal. I mean, it's helped over 4,000 families, particularly women and children, stay in their home because of this program. So I'm very proud of it. I think there is some opportunity to revamp and restructure some of the program in general and empower the Office of Eviction Defense with the resources that they need. And then also focus more on eviction diversion outreach as well, too. So we hope to continue the program. The money goes into 2026. There's also was a private, public-private partnership with the Gilbert Foundation that put money into it as well. So we hope to continue that as well.
State funding, potentially?
Yep, state as well. Thank you for mentioning that. We did have some money allocated from the state as well for the program. Yeah. So we'll continue to advocate for additional funding.
It has had an impact. The advocates have said that even what we're doing right now probably isn't fully funding.
It's not. Not at all.
I see that a lot with programs that we've created that are making an impact, but we need more resources to really take into that next level.
Yeah, and this was one where I can say me and the mayor kind of differed a bit in our approach. It was not something that he really fully felt that the city should fund. It should be more of the state or the county. And so again, to me, it's a program that's near and dear to my heart because I think it helps prevent homelessness from the onset. So it's a preventative program to keep people in their homes, stabilize our neighborhoods so we don't have blighted structures or foreclosures. So it's one that I care deeply about and would love to see continued as we move forward in the next administration.
One thing we have in common, we're both millennials.
Yeah.
I'm a little younger than you, not by too much though. And I'm curious, what the experience was for you growing up in Detroit, in the time that you did. I feel like, you represent kind of a changing of generational leadership in the city. And I think it's interesting because a lot of my peers have left the state.
Yeah.
A lot of them have, left Detroit and we're talking about how we bring them back. But what was your experience growing up in the city, in the time that you did?
Yeah, I mean, I had a great time in Detroit. It was one, for me, again, it goes back to really service. Spent a lot of time, WC3, Wayne County Community College District, doing financial aid there, working in governmental affairs. And my time in Detroit was very well spent. Detroit, I always say Detroit has done me right. I could not imagine myself in any other city, but I do understand that there's a lot of young people who graduate, and it's just kind of a cultural thing and norm that you get your education and you go to a major city, DC, New York, Chicago, whatever it may be. I always found that my heart and my purpose was in Detroit. And so I do understand that from an opportunity standpoint that we have to do much more to attract and retain our young people here in the city of Detroit, and really change the culture around Detroit is not the place to be when you graduate, but it actually is if we create the environment to do so.
And even the idea of like, once you have kids, it's time to move out of the city, which I hear people say all the time too, and that it's difficult to raise a family here. For people like maybe you graduated high school with, are a lot of them still here, or are they gone?
I think it's a combination of both. I have some, of course, that are gone to big cities, New York, Chicago, etc. Some who actually have come back more recently to Detroit because Detroit is a city that has a lot of growth and potential, and people want to be a part of that change. So there's a combination of both. And again, I think for me, is centering Detroit as a world-class city, as a destination of opportunity where our young people want to come back. Once they graduate, they don't have to leave. They can come because there's good jobs here. There's quality education. Our neighborhoods are thriving, and they find it as a place and a cool place as well to be as well, right? Because I know I was at the Cosm Detroit announcement where they had this immersive entertainment venue coming to downtown Detroit, and we talk about placemaking and having these cool places as well where young people like to come and be attracted to. So I think there's a lot of different, factors that play into the environment, the built environment that we have to create for the attraction and retaining of our young people.
As a millennial leader, has it been difficult to get older people to open the door? Have you had more to prove? No?
I will say when I first ran, yes. This was post-Kwame era.
Yeah.
So as I knocked on people's door, it was, I don't know about this again, I don't know if we're going to, So it was a lot of skepticism originally. Once I got elected and I proved who I was through my leadership, my integrity, and how I served, I've never had an issue of questioning my maturity or my ability because of my age. I think over the last decade, I've proven myself to be someone that people can trust and someone who takes my job seriously and doesn't just show up, but literally delivers for Detroit.
When we talk about the mayor and their role, a lot of that job is managing people.
Yeah.
It's leading departments, it's making sure stuff shows up on time and garbage is picked up and all of that. And, I think Duggan has been recognized for tapping his network that he's built throughout his long career before becoming mayor and bringing those people in. Our former budget director was like the state treasurer, right? So how, who are you going to be bringing in for? Maybe you can talk about individuals, maybe not. Who are going to lead these departments, right?
Yeah.
Or do you have experienced, qualified heavy hitters ready to come in? And are you worried about Duggan had been people leaving with this change in leadership, or do you hope that they'll stick around?
I hope that we need institutional knowledge. And I think there are some phenomenal directors that have been here for a very long time that I would hate to see leave. And so when the appropriate time presents itself, I will have those discussions with them about, possibly staying on board. But the beauty is that I'm very serious about recruiting talent in Detroit. And so whether that's locally or nationally, I pride myself on ensuring that we have the skills and the competency to move Detroit forward. And so Duggan did a great job at that. And I know that I'll do the same in ensuring that we're recruiting the best and the brightest that are also here in Detroit. But also if we need to look elsewhere to come and ensure that we have the most effective and efficient people, we will do so.
One of the bigger things that the council did, since I've been paying attention anyway, was the tax reforms that were passed, I think, 2 years ago. Obviously, overassessment is a major issue. People continue to voice concerns about not only being repaid for that $600 million that was taken from people, but making sure it doesn't happen again, and making sure things are fair now. Part of what you guys did was hire an independent auditor to take a look at how we're doing assessment in Detroit. And that report just came out. I read it. I'm still trying to understand it. But basically, it seemed like Detroit was following the law, which I think is doesn't necessarily mean that people are happy or activists in this space. So I guess, first of all, explain to me the intent behind the changes that the council passed and what's been the impact of that so far.
So the intent, and that was an ordinance that I sponsor, and that's a part of the People's Bills. And it's a property tax assessment ordinance to bring transparency to how property taxes are assessed. There's a lot of people who feel that their property taxes may be overassessed. They don't know how the value is determined, for example. And so a part of that ordinance was to give them the transparency that they need and empower them with the information to understand their tax tax bill and how you can appeal your property taxes if you do so choose to do so. And so the independent evaluator came and they did an assessment of properties throughout Detroit. And now we'll take that assessment and we'll review it ourselves and have a conversation to determine if we in fact believe that the lower income homes in Detroit are still being overassessed. And so again, I think it's really equipping council with the information and knowledge to really have these serious conversations, because we've heard it for quite some time that the lowest value homes are still being overassessed. And we never want the situation to happen again. So it's just trying to figure out what those solutions are. Yes, the city may be abiding by state law, but does that mean it's right? Does state law need to change? Is there a different process that the assessor can undergo that will give a more accurate reflection of assessments in Detroit? I think those are conversations and discussions that we still need to have.
Detroit Next is a community-led project, a collaboration between Detroit is Different and BridgeDetroit, which means we can't do this work without you. If you guys like this show, if you like the conversations we've been having with guests, please support us. Please go to bridgedetroit.com/donate and keep this free for everybody. I think that's really important for us. You can also subscribe and get our newsletters for free. You can get up-to-date city council coverage of arts and food security here in the city. And check us out on Instagram at Detroit Next Pod. Head over to our YouTube to get the full episodes and the interviews and see our shining faces in 4K, potentially.
I don't know about that.
You can also find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and DetroitNext.podbean.com. We're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep trucking along throughout the year. So stay with us and follow BridgeDetroit.com for the next interview with potentially the next mayor of Detroit.
Yeah, and hit Detroit is Different as well. They could use your support too.
Detroit Next is a community-led project from BridgeDetroit and Detroit is Different, which means that we can't do this work without you. We need your support. If you have a question or a comment and want to participate in this process throughout the year, give us a call. We have a phone line set up at 313-284-6407. Leave us a message and we'll play it on the podcast. If you like what we're doing, head to bridgedetroit.com and subscribe to our newsletters. All of that content, again, is free, no paywalls for anybody. We're trying to make this as accessible as possible. Head to our YouTube channel to get full episodes and interviews along with extra content throughout the year. You can also find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and DetroitNext.podbean.com. We're going to be doing this all year long, so stay with us. Follow Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different on your favorite social media platforms and take this ride with us. Thanks.